With the Eagles' dominant victory over the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl, one thing was very clear, stood out from the get-go, and honestly stood out all postseason for the Philadelphia Eagles, and that is the importance of a dominant front four, dominant blitz, dominant pass rush, something the Packers missed out, not poorly on. They didn't play poorly in pass rush this season, but there was definitely no stud. There is definitely no dominance with a four-man pass rush, which is really where the Eagles have been able to hand it to teams like the Chiefs, like any other teams like the Packers in the playoffs this year, having a four-man pass rush that is arguably as good as most teams blitzing 5 or 6. Where the Packers are missing out on, that they are a lot of conversations about them looking to address this offseason, is the pass rush, defensive end, defensive tackle, marking a lot of questions coming up as where should they address those issues. A lot of articles, a lot of conversations. Should it be free agency? Should it be draft? Where they fill some question marks, answer some question marks at defensive tackle or defensive end. So today we'll kind of break down what makes the most sense for them to draft. Let's call it first round. Break down both positions, which one will make more sense. Could start at defensive end and kind of evaluate where they're at now and what the draft could look like for them in that regard this year. At defensive end, the Packers certainly aren't moving off Rashawn Gary anytime soon. And Lucas Van Ness, unless you're trading him for a premier player or something like that, you're not getting rid of him quite yet. Brenton Cox is another guy who came in later last season, needed a lot of time to develop on the practice squad after missing most of his college career with off-field stuff going on, needed time to develop, didn't play a ton in college, but now that he's had some time to develop on the Packers practice squad and slowly mixed in this year, he looked really good. Besides Gary, he was arguably the best pass rusher on the team this year, the second half of this year at least. He's definitely earned his spot in the pecking order and will play a factor, as much as Van Ness, in how the Packers are going to approach free agency, the draft, or trades, given the talent that they have right now across from Gary. The problem right now is that the Packers are, if they were to add another edge, say in the draft, and not get rid of a Lucas Van Ness, not get rid of a Cox in a trade, you're adding another first-round pick to a group, a position that is already has a problem with a platoon, a rotation, a 3-4-man rotation when you add in Enigbari to the mix, when you add in Aaron Mosby. The Packers are the only team, this is the only time this last season, Packers were the only team with at least 6 players registering 150 snaps as primarily edge rushers. It's a rare outlier. We just saw how bad a 3 to 4-man platoon really impacted everyone involved. No one stood out. No one broke out. Hell, even Rashawn Gary played as much snaps as a rotational edge rusher. You look at his counterparts that are considered elite and dominant edge rushers, they're all playing well over 70% of their snaps. Rashawn Gary's barely was a starter level in terms of snap count this year, which is concerning. But when you consider what's across from him, those are a lot of young developing guys now. Van Ness, Cox, Enigbari's still young. A platoon hinders everyone's development and really minimizes the breakout opportunity. So if, let's say, they draft defensive end in the first round, no pick in the first round, or any pick for that matter, is a guaranteed a hit to work out. But at pick 23, realistically, they're drafting the fourth-ish best defensive end in the class at this point. Fourth, fifth best edge rusher guy in this class at this point. Is that really better than 2 years of Lucas Van Ness having developed going into year 3, which realistically drafting him was always meant to be a developmental project, which always meant year 2 or year 3 was supposed to be the year he really started to come on for the team. So the fourth best edge rusher in this class at pick 23 guarantee better success than what you're already going to get with Van Ness? It's not as much his fault that he hasn't been standing out yet or hasn't dominated the snap share. Yes, he has not developed as quickly as many would have liked. Preston Smith has been incredible before he was traded. He had a tough year this year, for sure. But after last year, he was definitely starting this year with that job. Considering how good he's always been as a run defender, especially in Green Bay, one of the better edge players in run defense in the NFL. You simply have to play him in that case with how important stopping the run is. Yes, getting to the quarterback is also equally as important. But the Packers now moved off Preston Smith. It opens the door for Van Ness and Cox to really step in now. And overall, this really isn't that special of a defensive end class. Abdul Carter's awesome. He's freaking cool. He's great. Will be an awesome pick. He's going to be going in the top 5, top 6, most likely. More than likely. It's not a special edge rusher class. There's no real slam dunk, no doubt, top 2 or 3 pick. Like when you consider when Myles Garrett came out, that was like one of those you can't miss here. There's definitely upside to adding one in the first round. In the sense of, look, if Van Ness comes out stumbling out of the gates this year, if Cox looks, good, not great. The problem is, the big issue here, as much upside as there could potentially be, is it really time to throw in the towel on Van Ness already? He's not had the chance to even grow into starter level snaps yet. Doesn't it look worse if you kind of cash it in on that project that you knew was supposed to be year 2 or year 3? Doesn't it look worse to cash in on that before you even get to year 3? And for what? What are you guaranteed to find better results in it at pick 23 with an edge rusher, 4th or 5th best in the class, in a kind of, all right, pass rusher class for the first round talents? So that's where there's kind of the struggle in defensive end where, like, they might be much better off. Look, it needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed urgently as a part of Gutekunst's whole mission this offseason. And to do that, the best option might just be through a trade. A lot of buzz around Max Crosby. They definitely have pieces. If you need to make a trade for Crosby, getting rid of Van Ness might just be the best thing in that situation. As much as it'd be great to see the Van Ness development through, you get a Crosby. I mean, you're willing to kind of give up. You have to give up something at the position. It's not going to be Gary. The point is to not have Gary and who the hell knows on the other side of Gary. The point is to have Gary and dominance on the other side of Gary. Right now, Van Ness isn't doing that. Cox is promising, but hasn't done that. Whoever you might draft at 23, certainly no sure bet to do that. So if you need to address a position with urgency, at least this year at that position, after the Eagles just showed how dominant they can be with just a 4-man pass rush and how much that matters for the rest of the defense, the rest of the scheme, everything else is so much easier when you have 4 dudes who can just bring it home on the quarterback. Don't even need the blitz. You got 4 dudes who do enough damage that's all it takes. The only way they really do that is by making a trade for a dominant edge rusher. Honestly, who cares the cost? If that is your goal, is to upgrade the position, it's a much more sure bet. But when you jump over to defensive tackle and how it might make sense for the Packers in the first round, it's definitely a little different conversation. But it's similar to last year with a very deep, stacked offensive line class. Brian Gutekunst made sure to get his. He got a piece of his pie in that sense. And again, going back to the Eagles, Chiefs, wow. Is it important to be good in the trenches on both sides? That was very evident all Super Bowl long. The better team in the trenches on both sides dominated that football game. It wasn't even close. So now in a stacked defensive tackle class this year, arguably 5-6 defensive tackles could go in round 1 this year. It's not impossible with the talent that there is. Probably won't be that many, but most likely 4 are going in round 1. Maybe 5. Probably only 1 in the top 10. Mason Graham, very good. The rest, the Packers might just have their pick. And Gutekunst might want to have that same strategy of, look, this is a deep stacked class at this one position. I want to get mine. And why not? Think about it. Kenny Clark coming off a down season. I'm not here to bash Kenny Clark, his contributions, his talent. Absolutely not. Here to acknowledge the fact of what happened last season for a player who's now entering the back half, later years of his prime, in a contract that is expensive with play that didn't live up to that price. Not this season, not in a new system. I think the new system hurt a lot of players, but Clark might have been the most impacted by it. He's definitely still an asset in terms of freeing up linebackers, helping out the linebackers, taking on double teams. Clark was the 8th most double team player at defensive tackle this season. The problem for him is the 7 that were double team more than him were also more productive pass rushers and in general, in run defense, in pass rush. It's not a good look. As much as he helped eat double teams for the likes of Edgerrin Cooper, your linebackers, to, make plays and not have to worry about a guard coming up and blast him in the chin. This is his age 30 season. And unfortunately for Clark, the Packers have an out in 2025. After 2025, they can get out right before an $11 million roster bonus for the 2026 season. So $17 million dead cap to get out, right, as of now. Things could change. But $17 million dead cap to get out after the season. If it doesn't go well again, don't have to pay an $11 million roster bonus. Clark wasn't strong in run defense last year either. Worst pass rush year of his career. He didn't even play starter level snaps. In any season he's played 16 games, lowest amount of snaps he's ever played was this last year. He's good, wasn't certainly far from great. And that was kind of a trend for defensive tackle for Packer this last year. Add in Devontae White. Yeah, he was hurt a bit. Just good, though. He's not great. His pass rush has not elevated much over the last couple seasons at all. He looked a little bit better for sure in terms of actually finishing plays this year, but he's still better off the field in obvious rundown situations. Definitely can be an asset as a pass rusher, got good moves, and he can be disruptive, no doubt about it. But he's not complete. Just like TJ Slayton. Just Slayton's kind of the inverse. He's really awesome as a run defender, but he's not really going to do much for you as a pass rusher. He reminds me a lot of like kind of the poor man's Jordan Davis. Eagles Jordan Davis, big fella. I think there's a lot more expectations of Davis as a pass rusher, certainly. But him and Slayton are very kind of similar players. There's mammoth human beings that I don't wish on the worst person to have to be in front of trying to guard, that are going to be very disruptive against the run, kind of give you some moments in the past will, sometimes be just explosive up the middle, but just kind of the opposite of Devontae White, just not complete though. And then you got Brooks and Wooden who are kind of, Brooks is better as a pass rusher and Wooden's better in run defense and the kind of inverse and the other, one another. But no one is great. Everyone's just good. It worked in the system. The run defense was awesome. But the point of this is all that the Packers don't have a guy at defensive tackle. Kenny Clark used to be the guy. The goal is then to always get that guy and get another dude next to Clark and make this unstoppable up the middle. And unfortunately, Wyatt was supposed to be that guy and just hasn't really panned out to be that guy yet. He might never. We don't know if we'll see him in the long term. So they don't have that guy at defensive tackle right now. We just saw the Eagles prove how important it is to have a dominant presence up the middle. Jalen Carter's one of one. Not saying Green Bay needs to aspire to, they should aspire to have a Jalen Carter. Thank God the Bears said we don't need that. But they don't have the guy. They don't have a complete player at defensive tackle right now. And this unit could absolutely afford a premier player or a potential premier player to come in and take over. Generally speaking, the best defensive tackles in football are all first-round picks. Chris Jones, definitely an outlier. Not only are they mostly first-round picks, they generally always take about a year until, they're really disruptive. They might be pretty solid as rookies, but generally speaking, it takes till year 2 until they're really good. But that said, they most can come in year 1 and provide a big jolt of dominance. We saw it with the Seahawks with taking Murphy this last season. One of the top defense tackles, not the top defense tackle in the class, and there was moments. Year 2, Murphy is going to be scary for the Seahawks. Even as a rookie, he had some very scary good moments. So year 2 of that defensive tackle's contract, if the Packers were to select defensive tackle this year in round 1, year 2 of that contract, we might be looking at a whole new Packers interior defense line here. There's no guarantee Clark's there. There's no guarantee Wyatt's there. So you're stuck with Slayton, Brooks, Wooden. Is that what you'd want? I'd highly doubt that. That's a couple good. It's nothing great. That's not going to give you what the Eagles just showed how important it is to have. So if the Packers don't do that, they're kind of stuck in no man's land again. They're stuck in a spot of hoping Clark at age 30 is going to come back to life. Hoping Wyatt in the year 4 now is actually going to start ascending his play. But, realistically, these guys are just great complements at this point in their careers to, having a potentially dominant defensive tackle leading the charge. They'd be great complements. Any of them. At this point, what we saw last season, none of them should be the guy to build around. There's so much room for improvement here. And in normal drafts, the top DT, the top defensive tackle or two are usually gone by the time the Packers are 10 to pick. And that's entirely not the case this year. They're going to have their pick of a couple of really good defensive tackles. Guys like Kenneth Grant might be there. Kenneth Grant might go earlier. Derek Harmon would be a home run. Tyleik Williams would be a lot of fun. Walter Nolan, just a couple incredible value picks at pick 23 that would come in and be so helpful for Green Bay right away. In the middle, there's no great. No one did anything great. There's not a single thing great to write home about the interior defensive line play this last season. And now you're sitting in a rare defensive tackle class with 4 or 5 first-round picks who could come in, provide a massive jolt, get a top 2-3 defensive tackle in this class, fall in their lap. That's not going to happen often. No matter how good Clark plays next year, his time in Green Bay is coming to an end, especially with Green Bay and this youth movement. Clark, as good as he is, as much of a leader as he is, at times almost so. They don't have another option. They don't have anything else. This type of defensive tackle class does not exist. This defensive end class is very average. This defensive tackle class is very rare in terms of how talented and deep it is for round one talent, just like OT last year. So for the Packers at this point, it comes down to it. Defensive tackle just might have to, it just makes a little bit more sense to go to rather than defensive end. Defensive end will be fun. I think the problem there is the platoon. You don't solve anything across from Gary by doing that. Because if you go into that with Van Ness and Cox still on the roster, you're sharing snaps between 4 guys again. It was a disaster for that last season. It was a disaster. As good as Hafley was, as amazing as the defense was in terms of its improvements, across from Gary was a disaster. We had no idea who was going to be out there. There was 4 guys rotating. You had another guy to that mix at this point. You're not solving any issues. At defensive tackle, there's not enough great there. There's not enough juice and production that says, we don't need to draft defensive tackle. We don't need to address that in the draft. It's going to be a lot easier for the Packers to slot in a first-round pick defensive tackle over the likes of a Brooks or Wooden or a Clark if he keeps stumbling, Wyatt's been getting hurt. It's going to be a lot easier to justify that pick than it is to be justified defensive end when you just used your pick 13 in the draft on Van Ness 2 drafts ago. And you got Cox, who looked really freaking good, who had a top pass rush week, I believe it was week 16 in the NFL. He's shown as many signs of life and potential as anyone they could draft this year. So what is their gain, really, immediately to address urgency from drafting defensive end comparatively to when you think about defensive tackle and what you can do by plugging in one of these guys to not jump over your recent first-round pick? Defensive tackle in draft seems like a much better value for pick 23, for the money, for the production potential, for the long-term potential, for the rarity of the class, the talent in this class. Packers got a lot of hard decisions to make, if not front for this offseason. A lot of hard decisions for Gutekunst. He's going to really earn the salary this year, this offseason.